welcome to Spotlight here on Hope TV, where you look and live. And here on Spotlight, we always do our very best to bring you persons who are doing wonderful things in our community so that we can all be able to experience the abundant life, the promised abundant life. And you are always part of this conversation. So even as we begin our Spotlight today, do remember that our text message number is 22232. Text us that which it is that you feel is a comment, is a question, send it to us. Also engage us on Facebook and also on Twitter as we engage this important subject of diabetes in Kenya. Now, diabetes is a condition that is affecting nearly 700,000 people here in Kenya. And a majority of these people, one of the trends that's coming up is that a lot of children and young people, which is surprising, are becoming more. There's an increase in the number of young people and children who are getting diabetic. Because sometimes we've thought it's always been a condition that is maybe for the more senior people. But there are things about this condition that we really need to know. And this November is also the month where the world commemorates and raises awareness on this condition of diabetes. And on Spotlight, this program, we are happy to have Dr. Cyprian Kamau.
Great to see you.
Welcome,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Harry.
Thank you very much.
Always a good thing to have a medic in the program, because we know that something good, something biological, is going to bring us enlightenment in terms of improving our own lives. And Dr. Cyprian Kamau comes to us from the Christian Health Association of Kenya, abbreviation CHAK. And do again be part of this conversation. We are very glad to have you, Dr. Harry. This is the era of the handshake.
Thank you so much.
The handshake is important. Because it means unity, it means strength, it means we are one going forward.
A lot of things and some,
yes,
of course, some effort to move forward.
Exactly. Welcome.
Great.
You're coming to us from CHAK, right?
That's right.
And some of our viewers would want to know what CHAK is all about.
CHAK, or Christian Health Association of Kenya, is a national organization of the faith-based health institutions, hospitals, health centers, and dispensaries that are owned by the Protestant churches in Kenya. We also have affiliated church health programs and churches themselves. Our membership currently is about 575. Of course, fluctuations here and there of plus minus 1% is normal. CHAK is an old institution indeed. We are 72 years today. 1946 is when the organization was done. We have seen, of course, a lot of changes in the organization over the years, but here we are today, 72 years, working to improve the health of communities through our faith-based health institutions. Yes.
Okay. It's interesting to just know that there are some organizations that are doing some wonderful work, especially in the bringing together what we can call most of the faith-based medical facilities. And let's talk to you as a person, Dr. Harry, and because we're talking about diabetes, do you have any special interest yourself in this area, on this condition of diabetes?
Two things. One is the head of health programs in CHAK. It is my duty, of course, to drive the programs of the institution, including non-communicable diseases, which is one of our flagship programs in CHAK. And this is a narrative we are driving across. But come to Dr. Kamau as a person, of course, non-communicable disease is a passion for me. And as you know, this is an area where we need to start driving the narrative from the communities all along, the way to the top echelons where we are talking about very specialized services and understand each level what we need to do to ensure that we prevent and control diabetes in the country. So that the big number which you are saying that we have, which is true, then can be able to enjoy a relatively healthy life in the course of their life in the world, and to ensure that families live a comfortable life. Non-communicable diseases, including diabetes, have got such an impact in the family, and hence the theme of the World Health Organization during this year, World Diabetes Day, which is diabetes and the family.
Okay.
Yes.
Diabetes and the family.
And the family.
All right.
Yes.
That family focus is really important because it brings this condition not just us to look at it from an individual point of view, but how it actually affects the family. And you've mentioned communicable diseases, and of course there was non-communicable diseases as well, like diabetes. But over time, especially as a country and as a region, what we've known more are the communicable diseases, the ones that are caused, as you say, by, let's say, malaria, for instance, and tuberculosis, and in those kinds of diseases. That's what we really were dealing with. But there seems to be an increase now in these non-communicable diseases that seemed for some time to be an issue of, of the West. Your comment on that?
True. That's the picture. We in Kenya are very aware that right from the word go, before and after independence, the main burden of disease that we were dealing with were diseases related, one, to infectious diseases, including malaria, tuberculosis, and others. And then diseases that afflict the mother and the child, maternal and neonatal health. And the amount of work, the burden that we had was so big, such that the nation has spent the greater part of the time after independence investing in this. Earlier on, the narrative was such that non-communicable diseases, hypertension, diabetes, rheumatoid conditions, were conditions that were hitherto not common within our environment and communities, more so in the West. But we know that risk factors associated with these conditions are here with us. We have seen great urbanization. We have seen eating habits change. We have seen along the way people moving from very active life to sedentary kind of life in offices, and all these conditions, uptake of very high calorific foods, uptake of salt, too much sugar in foods, all these things are changing the health status and raising the level of non-communicable diseases. And in this case, diabetes and hypertension are critical areas to look at. Of course, without going into other areas, we know we have got other areas to worry on non-communicable diseases like injuries. And I'm sure as we see it now, matatus are there. Probably that's a discussion for the day. But yes, we are seeing more and more of non-communicable diseases. The idea that they are Western. When I grew up, we used to say diabetes is a disease for the rich. There was some sense in that if you look at what we have described, but here, today, we are seeing more and more. You said about children, we are seeing more and more children.
We'll talk about that as we go along in the program.
Yes.
And also, when you mentioned about diabetes having been known as also now locally as a disease for the rich, but now there has also been this big prevalence that some people who are not economically endowed also are being affected heavily by diabetes. Of course, you have alluded to the fact that there has been lifestyle things that we will talk about in this program. But just for the sake of our viewers, maybe you can again tell us, enlighten us, what are the real live causes of diabetes?
We would rather talk of the risk factors associated with the diabetes. And the good thing to note is that these risk factors we are going to mention are not only associated with the diabetes, they are also closely associated with other non-communicable diseases, including high blood pressure. And as we talk through, we shall probably be able to see the link between the diabetes and high blood pressure, hypertension. One of the things is, one, sedentary life. The amount of exercises that one does is critical. And it is interesting that, of course, it's only about 6% of Kenyans who don't have adequate exercises because of the nature of our background. But the 6%, most of them are people who are in urban areas or people who are working, and they need to be educated more. So the other risk factor that we talk about is uptake of foods that are high in calorie. If you go to town, the number of fast food businesses that are coming up, sometimes I can't count them. I hear of this one is being said. And when you go there, you see some chicken, potatoes, a lot of fat. And at the end of taking that food, then you add some other drink, which has got a lot of sugar to it. You don't want to name brands here. But at the end of the day, the amount of energy that you are putting in, the amount of calories is so much, such that your body may not have adequate, may not be able to deal with that. You develop situations where your body is unable to produce enough insulin, or the sensitivity of insulin to deal with that is not, makes it inadequate.
Okay, no, Dr. That's very important, because sometimes it's important for us to understand why, when you exercise, what exactly happens to the body that makes the risk of diabetes go lower, right?
Yes.
What the real thing that happens to the body, or when you consume these foods you've talked about, what exactly happens to the body that makes it now one that is not able to produce insulin? What exactly happens to the body? Just tell us biologically.
Probably, we probably need to say what insulin is. Very simple terms. Insulin, and diabetes is a condition whereby your body is unable to produce insulin in adequate amounts. Or you have some good level of insulin, but your tissues are not sensitive. So the use of insulin or the activity of insulin is not optimal.
Okay.
Yes. Now, insulin is a hormone within your body which enables sugar, glucose, to move from the compartment of your blood vessels where it is flowing after you have fed. Goes through the liver, flowing through the arteries and the veins, and then through the capillaries into the cells. But without insulin, then the sugars are unable to go through. So they remain in the blood vessels, and the sugars start going higher, the concentration goes higher than normal. That time your cells are actually starving of energy because they don't have it. It's akin to say this door is so small such that somebody who wants to give us some dinner is waiting outside there. Yet the trolley, which the door cannot allow the trolley to come. We are hungry, but the food is there.
Dr. Terry, you sound like an excellent teacher, right? That's a great illustration, yeah.
Yes.
You're starving inside here,
Yes.
but the dinner is just outside the door.
That's right. And when it is there, you don't eat it, it's going to start causing problems. It's going to go bad, it's going to cause infection there, it's going to rot. So the complications that we get out of diabetes is because of this elevated blood sugar, which we are unable to push in because we don't have the control to open the gates. It's the insulin which opens the gates for it to enter.
So when you exercise, what happens?
Two things. When you exercise, you expend more energy. Now, glucose is the sole source of energy in a human being. Whatever you eat, you can take fat, you can take any meat, or take whatever. At the end of the day, that will be broken down to glucose for your energy. They're stored in the liver as glycogen for quick conversion, or as glucose in the cells where it is used up. So if you start running around and doing exercise, of course you expend that. Yeah? And when you expend it, of course, if you are stored in a fat, then it also be broken down, turned into glucose, and then expended. So you will be able to reduce excess fats, excess sugars, and burn them out.
Okay.
And that will help your body remain lean, and then the amount of insulin in you is able to deal with that amount, because you don't have immeasurable amounts of insulin. You can only produce so much. So if you have got bigger workload for it, for the body, then of course you are going to have excess.
Okay.
You cannot be able to handle that.
All right.
So yes.
It's a very graphic image that you put there.
Yes.
And our viewers, especially the ones who are taking this as a really educative moment for them, they want to know what are the outright symptoms that I am beginning to have, diabetes. What are the indicators? Yes.
That's an interesting question, because when you start seeing symptoms in diabetes, that lady or gentleman has been having the diabetes for quite a while, in many cases. But let's just mention some of them. Some of them is just general tiredness. Why are you getting tired? Because your cells are hungry. There's no energy.
The food is at the door.
Yes, but they're hungry. They're stuff. So you have general weakness, and you don't feel like want to do anything. And sometimes you start wasting. One of the common ones is frequent micturition or passing of urine. Every other minute you can see fellas going out. Why? Because there's so much sugar, and the osmosis, I don't want to use that word, there's too much sugar in the blood, makes the kidneys extract more water from your body, and you keep passing urine. And that is related with feeling of getting thirst. All the time you're thirsty and you wanted to keep taking water. Yeah? So common things is you feel thirsty, you are always passing urine very frequently, somebody is waking up many times, something which was not there before, somebody is losing weight. Yeah? These are symptoms. Once you see those, you start asking yourself, there is something unusual.
And they have to be at a level where, at a heightened level, you can tell this is abnormal. It doesn't have to be a regular thirst, right? It has to have an extraordinary aspect to it.
The regular thing is that if I take a cup of water or some juice or something, I feel very comfortable and I don't need it. But with the diabetes, I'll take this glass of water. After 30 minutes, I'll take another one. Just keep craving for this water. And that goes on and on. And you keep moving, out in the night, you're going out many times. And this is troublesome. It bothers the individual. And the individual knows that this is not normal. This is not me. If he's losing weight, he knows my trousers are a little bit loose. I was not like that. Yeah. It's not like that before. Now, interesting, those are things which can be seen by the person.
Yeah.
But there are complications which the individual cannot see. And you might go to the doctor and tell the doctor, look, I can't see, and I think I want to go to an ophthalmologist so that I can see. And of course, when he looks at your eyes, he'll do your refraction, but when he also looks at the fundus, you'll be able to see some changes within the eyes, which may suggest that you have got diabetes. And then, of course, being a medical person, you should be able to say, hey, wait a minute, let's do some tests. And then it's going to be... So a lot of people with diabetes are diagnosed when they come with other conditions. You come with tuberculosis. When I was training, we used to say, when you see TB, please dig out. There must be, most likely there is diabetes. Of course, when HIV came, when we saw TB, we started looking for HIV. But TB is common because there is an association, reduced immunity. So what am I trying to say? Diabetes comes in many ways. There are common things that the ones we have said that the individual may be able to say. But the doctor should be able to pick what we call the signs. What we see are the symptoms, what we can be able to feel. Then he should be able to pick out a few others.
Okay.
Yes.
And, you know, when we learn about diabetes, we hear about some different forms. You know, we have some that are really critical, others that are said to be conditional, others you can manage through life. You hear about diabetes type 1, diabetes type 2. You hear about a diabetes that comes to women who are expectant. Can you just separate for us these types in a brief way, these types of diabetes?
Yeah, that's right. Very briefly, diabetes type 1 is the type of diabetes that you see in children. Usually it is diabetes which is caused by mechanisms which lead to a situation whereby the individual requires insulin for survival. He is not producing any insulin at all. So he has to be treated using insulin.
And you say this is a child.
Usually it is for the younger people.
So does it mean that they do not have an insulin manufacturing capacity, or what does that mean? Why is it specifically in children?
Why it is specifically in children, I think I may not be able to give you a technical answer to that.
Okay.
There must be many factors, but we know the islets, which we are calling the factory in the spleen, do not have the capacity whatsoever. It could be a viral infection. Yes, and that is common. The key thing is that they lose the capacity to produce insulin. Now, it's not just small children. Did we say, technically speaking, anybody before 40 years should not be developing diabetes? And usually when I was in school, we were told type 1 is between 0 to 40 years. But we are seeing younger and younger people getting diabetes. In fact, in my program, we have brought that figure down to 30 years and we screen anybody who is 30 years and above because we know we are seeing more. But type 1 is basically for people who are younger, 40 years and below. Yeah, it requires insulin as a replacement therapy. You are replacing the insulin of the body, yeah, through injection or through pumps. There are very nice mechanisms of doing that. Type 2 usually occurs in the older person. And in type 2, you have not totally lost the capacity to produce insulin. You still have some of it. Two things. It could be less than what you require, and on top of that, it could be that the sensitivity of tissues to insulin has been compromised, yeah, such that it is not working optimally. What it means is that you could frog, so to speak, the cells of the spleen, the islets, produce a little bit more by giving some drugs. And those are the drugs which we take by mouth, the orals. But it reaches a point where that may not be able to work. And indeed, we know the current mode of treatment now is to start people on insulin much earlier than before. Indeed, there are some experts who believe that the earlier the better. Yeah, and at the end of the day, you need to strike a balance between your oral medication and your insulin so that you can get optimal control. That is a technique which the physician must have to be able to titrate your dosages and all that. But in short, that is type 1, type 2, type 1 for the younger persons, including the children. Now, pregnancy is interesting because it is stressful to the individual. Hormonal changes. And quite a number of women do develop frank symptoms of diabetes when they are pregnant. This is usually type 2 diabetes. In a small majority of them, when they deliver, the symptomatology might just come down. But we know in most cases, and in many cases, that diabetes remains and they need to be treated. This is what we call gestational diabetes. Yes. And it is quite common. It is one of the things that all gynecologists, all doctors who are managing pregnant women must be, in life too, and they must check always that they must check to exclude the possibility of diabetes from a pregnant woman. And that way then the health of the infant, the health of the neonate is improved.
Okay.
Yes.
Very, very enlightening there. Viewers, we are talking about diabetes, and there's a lot that you and I need to know so that we can be able to stay away from the risk factors that would end up in diabetes. And when we come back, we will be talking about your favorite food, the nyama choma, and also alcohol, and how do these factors accelerate or just predispose you towards this condition of diabetes. You want to stay with us here on Spotlight on Hope TV, where you look and live. We'll be right back. Viewers, this is Spotlight here on Hope TV, where you look and live, and we are talking about the condition of diabetes, and we have with us Dr. Cyprian Kamau coming to us from CHAK, Kenya, and a lot of enlightening things. And keep texting us on 22232, keep engaging us on Facebook and Twitter as well. You are always part of this conversation, and the amazing thing is that if you are able to sustain a particular lifestyle, then diabetes is a condition that is actually avoidable. And just before we went for the break, Daktari, we talked about what Kenyans love a lot, nyama choma. And we are going to this festive season now. Lots of meat, and we also known as a drinking, nation. A lot of drinks, and some people have this culture whereby that is what they do almost, every weekend in heavy doses. What would you advise this kind of lifestyle? How would you talk to us about this kind of lifestyle?
Thank you so much. I think this takes us to the issue you had brought earlier of risk factors. What is it that we do that predisposes us to develop diabetes? One, we talked about uptake of food, certain foods, including very fatty food, a lot of energy-containing foods, sugars, and all that.
And what's exactly wrong with nyama choma? What would make it a risk factor? That's spoiling the party. You know that? You've just ruined it.
That is true. there's nothing really wrong with meat taken in the right amounts. At the end of it all foods that you take can and are metabolized by the body and changed to sugars. Even protein, once the body has taken enough, the balance of it is turned into fat and stored. Yeah? And when your body requires that fat can be metabolized to glucose and used. Glucose is the final product in the energy meal of the body. So when you eat a kilo of meat, you are not being any wiser than the person who eats 5 grams. In fact, the fellow who eats 5 grams is a lot wiser than you, because he's not overloading his body a lot of fat, unnecessary uptake of animal proteins, which has got certain problems. We know it's one of the things we tell people, please eat in moderation when it comes to reducing the possibility of getting non-communicable disease, including diabetes, including hypertension. Now, let me put these risk factors into 2 categories so that we understand. There are those factors that we as humans can do something about, and we call them modifiable factors. You can say, today, I'm not going to take some Coca-Cola or some soda. I'm not going to take sugar in my tea. I will be able to exercise. I'm going to reduce my weight by doing exercises, reducing the amount of food that I'm eating before I sleep. I'm going to ensure that I eat fruits and my vegetables at least 5 servings a day. I will ensure that I stop taking alcohol. Yeah? Those are things you can do.
Modifiable factors.
Modifiable factors. And there are those 5 critical factors which I have meant, you see, like uptake of sugars, you know, which leads to obesity. Yeah? Low uptake of vegetables, that we can change. Being more active in terms of exercise, that is in our will, we can be able to do that. But there are a few things we can do something about. You are a male. We know you have got a greater tendency to develop diabetes. You are older. As you go older, the chances that you develop diabetes become a lot higher. Yeah? You have got some genetic predisposition. Your family has a history. There's nothing you can do. You are born into a family. But by and large, the greater majority of us develop diabetes because we do not take care of the modifiable
factors. Okay.
Yes.
Now, Dr. Tariq, very clear there. Modifiable and non-modifiable ones.
Yes.
And in Kenya, especially, we still are in that culture whereby you go to hospital when you are sick. We don't have what you can call like a screening culture, whereby you have this medical exam maybe every so often. Of course, that sounds more of a rich kind of practice. Not so much people who are not economically endowed. They feel like, oh, how do I even go to have a screen? Why should I get screened in the first place? There's nowhere in their minds. But given their predisposition to diabetes, for instance, can you maybe explain to us why screening is important and where you can access it, whatever it is that you are in this country?
I think that is the area we should be touching more and more for us to be able to control some of these conditions. The standard practice. And that is what we have. If you look at some of the figures that you have, like how many people have been requested to stop drinking alcohol? How many people have been asked to stop taking salt in terms of reducing hypertension? How many people have been asked by a medical worker over the last 3 years? The figures are very scaring. 10%, 5%, and they are there demonstrated in a STEP survey which was done in 2015. But we have medical people. Now, why is that? Our practices are based on health facility services. We wait for people to come. Why is that not an appropriate method of dealing with diabetes, of dealing with hypertension in any community? Diabetes, like we said, is largely a silent condition. It doesn't talk. The minute it starts talking, it is late. We are coming to you because I can't see properly. I have got complications. I'm coming to see I've got complications of the kidney. I'm coming to you because I'm drinking too much water, I have lost a lot of weight. By that time, probably the amount of blood sugar is so high, and of course complications have already set in. We need to diagnose our people very early. How do we do that if the disease is silent? So this is a condition, just like some other few, like hypertension, which require a community to be aware that that condition exists. And I could be having it whether I have pain or not. Just like HIV virus. You do not need to be sick, but you could be having it. So you need to be tested. Diabetes, we must educate our people. We must change our health-seeking behavior. How many Kenyans will go walk to a clinic, a health facility, at the community? I'm not saying you go to the county or sub-county hospital. The next health facility, which is the dispensary, say, please, I am 40 years, let me have my blood sugar tested. The question is he aware of the importance of doing that? As long as that is not happening, then we will see people coming to us in hospitals to be treated. People don't come to hospitals to have the disease or conditions prevented. No, they come to us because the body is telling them they are unwell.
You've touched on some very interesting perspective there about our facilities, our system being such that we wait for people to come to us.
That is true.
Now, the outreach or community dimension is so important, especially when it comes to the screening component and all that. And I just want to ask you, especially being a specialist, in community health, what do we need to do as a country to be able to strengthen what you can call that outreach program? Not necessarily the one that's based on, say, there's an outbreak of a particular disease, so we need to go and vaccinate the people out there, but as part of our system, that outreach component is part of what every person in Kenya interacts with on a day-to-day basis.
We need to strengthen our community health systems. It is not that the Ministry of Health has not done anything. We know of the good intentions of the community health strategy. We know the structure which brings out communities using community health workers, community health volunteers. I know that is an intervention which has really helped us do a lot in terms of maternal and neonatal health, HIV programming, and it requires to continuously be strengthened because there are some certain critical pillars of that process, which includes motivation of the community, people, or rather community-owned resource persons to continuously engage themselves in matters prevention of community, diseases.
And just I think again looking at our government,
Yes.
and certain gaps that have evolved over the years. For
Yes.
instance, which I connect with this, there is a certain time when agricultural officers were known to visit farms.
Now they don't.
On a regular basis, to an extent that you would know that how come if the officer did not come within a certain maybe a month or so, you would notice how come he or she did not come. Now we find that health facilities, the community health dimension also, it's like it just comes when there are very specific challenges. So I think you're raising an important point there, that there's a need to invest in that aspect for us to actually deal with a condition, for instance, like diabetes, to increase the screening at the basic level, not necessarily at the sick level, but at the very basic, almost home level, right? Now, that is where there's also a gap that other, what you can call players in the market come in, because you tell us that once the condition sets in, then it's chronic. It doesn't leave, right? But somebody else says, no. Another player in the health sector, I would not say whether it's a real legitimate player where the government allows that to happen, I'm not so sure. They will say that, no, diabetes will cure it in 3 days. You take this concoction and within a month you come back with the condition totally cured. Now, can you comment on that, Dr. Harry?
Yes, I go again to community, to education, awareness, and educating people and letting them know about diabetes. Diabetes is a chronic disease. Once you have lost the capacity to produce insulin, you don't regain it. It remains permanent. Unless you have got miracles, which are not very common for you to change that, we do not expect that to be reversed. So you have to continuously take up medicine. That's part of the education that we should give people at the community. And people need to know that diabetes without treatment eventually will take your life. Yes. Once you develop diabetes, you will require treatment. And if you don't get treatment, you will get complications, and of course, diabetes is fatal. Today, as we sit, we lose about 20,000 people annually in diabetes. The prevalence of diabetes for people who have got elevated blood sugar is about 3%. But those who are pre-diabetes is another about 3%, so total 7% of the adult population. Mm-hmm. Those people, communities must be such that we use community systems and structures. Community health work or the community health strategy is just one, which the government has supported. And I want to tell you that the community health strategy, right from Alma Ata, this town in where this, Kazakhstan, I think that's where the guys were last week to review that particular, intervention. We needed to know even community health strategy arose from, or rather was started by church organizations, by church health systems. Mm-hmm. We used to train the local people to pass messages. Yeah? What we are seeing now is a lot of governments, including Kenya, have got a very well laid down community health strategy. Like I said, it has some porous areas which require, it needs community health strategy. Sometimes they need to talk to clinical systems so that they can link referrals, be able to refer from community to facility and vice versa. We need to use other systems like the church. And Christian Health Association is very keen to use pastoral and church development systems and programs as platforms for giving health education. Why? Because these platforms are self-regenerating. They have been created by the community. If you need any amount of, if you need to motivate a community, look at what happens in community systems. It is internal, it is intrinsic. You don't give them any money. And once they have bought your idea, then education goes on. And that is the reason as to why some of us, like Christian Health Association, is really picked up training of pastors, training of lay people, training of women groups, in the various aspects of primary health care. We're talking about diabetes, hypertension, and sometimes working with the counties, community health workers, give them instruments, glucose machines, getting them the strips, giving them the blood pressure cuffs, and train them to be able to do those screens right at the community. Over the last 7 years, we have been using those platforms to screen, educate, and refer. And our programs cover a whole lot of 22 counties. Health facilities that we are covering are about 130. We, of course, for hypertension, which is not really the subject of today, is another area which we have used similar approaches, systems, family planning. So the idea of using the community entrenches systems that will enable people to be diagnosed much earlier.
And Dr. What we hear that, and of course there are many church leaders and Christians who are watching this program, is that when it comes to diabetes, that there is a huge opportunity for the local church to be part of the community process. There's a huge opportunity, and coming to CHAC, you are willing to support a local church to be a place where that function, that screening, and that awareness is continually, not occasionally, dispensed. Is that what the pastors should actually be able to know and hear from CHAC through this program today?
That is our message. That is our narrative. Strengthening community health systems, including church, both at the pastoral level for message giving at the higher level, and then using the church community development and religious systems to continuously convey messages in health to their congregants.
Okay. And of course, there's a lot going on now in the country, especially on matters of health.
Yes.
A lot of publicity is on, huge events around maternal health care, and also now there's universal health care going on. There's a whole rollout whereby people have access to treatment without pay. I think that's being rolled out right now by the government. And would want to also hear from you about diabetes and the cost of treatment. There are some diseases that once they set into the family, like cancer, for instance, or the family is really devastated in terms of its resources. It totally depletes resources. Now, diabetes and cost, your experience, can you tell our views about that?
Financing of healthcare, and especially financing of chronic diseases, is something which requires to be well thought of. The cost of health in chronic diseases can be catastrophic to a family. All you need is a breadwinner of a particular family to get diabetes or hypertension, develop complications. One, they need to expend money themselves to get drugs on an ongoing basis for investigations.
Mm-hmm.
If they have got things like conditions like kidney complications arising from diabetes, which is one of the commonest, then of course they are going to need dialysis on an ongoing basis. Somebody needs to pay for that. We have seen families which were very well to do, but at the instance of one of the members getting these conditions, the fortunes go down.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they can't even afford school fees for children. The priority becomes now the support of that particular individual. You have got to buy drugs on an ongoing basis. So do we have mechanisms that are likely to support this kind of a family? Let's look at the situation as it is. We are lucky that currently we have a government that is looking at various ways of assisting management of health. But I like starting from the baseline. If you look at the family, what are the sources of financing? Where do they get the money to finance their health? One is that if they've got their small businesses, then they've got to look at how much they are getting there, how much they can keep at home, and how much they can use these drugs. How costly are these drugs? Where else they can get? Some of them are employed. If you get very sick, you may not even be able to work. Yeah? So, the next thing to do is, as a country, to say whose responsibility is it to ensure that the citizens get treatment. And there are certain opportunities for doing that. One is that the nation can have a social mechanism, a social insurance mechanism, which people who are healthy, people who are working, can be able to contribute. And once they contribute, those who are unfortunate to get sick, then they can be able to put their hands into that pool and then take care of themselves. And that is the principle of the national NHIF. Mm-hmm. The only problem of NHIF currently is that probably we may not be collecting a lot of money. It purely targets those people who are employed. We know there are not very many. Probably, I don't know, probably it has got something like 1.2, 1.3 million. I don't think they are more than that. I'm told currently they may be something like 2 million. They have been very active over the last 3-4 years, especially
drives and
yes,
yeah.
And they need to do that, but they also need to open up further, go into people who are doing business. There are very many people who are doing businesses which could enable them to to contribute. There are very many people who are farmers, and all they need is to be educated. The purpose of doing it. And you can imagine we have a cooperative system in this country. Mm-hmm. If you go to Murang'a here, how many coffee farmers have got NHIF card? We should ensure that every coffee farmer has got it. We need to ensure that every sugarcane farmer has it. Do they have the capacity to do that? It's only 6,000 shillings in a year. Mm-hmm. The mechanism of payment should be such that that money can be recovered before it is paid. I remember when we were young, we would go to the cooperative. If there is a shortage of maize, take a bag of maize, take it home, and when the payment for the coffee comes, the cost of that bag is reduced. So we couldn't access that credit. Mm-hmm. These are some of the things we needed to look at. Use the systems that we have, and Kenya is one country which is very special in terms of cooperatives.
And so what I hear you say, there are so many channels, and for the sake of the health of the Kenyans,
yes,
even handling diseases like this, then a lot of focus should continue being put in all these avenues possible, so that everyone has access to healthcare, even in long-term diseases and conditions like this one. I think it's good to end our program on a good note, on a note of good news, because I have seen people who are in their 80s, and when I listen to their stories, they learned they were diabetic in their 30s, but they've managed to be, so healthy through the years, meaning that it doesn't have to kill you.
No, it doesn't have to. Like we said, diabetes may be chronic, hypertension may be chronic. It can be controlled. The idea is, one, get it diagnosed early before you develop complications of your internal organs. We have to go to the community, put mechanisms for early diagnosis, screen early diagnosis, put people on treatment. The problem is here, when you do a massive screening, then go to the hospital, to the local facilities, the clinic officer doesn't have the capacity. I was reading here to you that there is only about 5% of people who have been asked by a health worker to stop drinking, for example. We need to educate the healthcare workers. And of course change the narrative, because some of these conditions can only be treated by doctors alone traditionally. But the ministry and the players are now working to be able to task shift and build the capacity of smaller facilities, health centers to manage hypertension, to manage diabetes, also change the guidelines, working together and be able to say, yes, we have got a system which tells the nurse, this is what you can do, but beyond here, please do this. If this guy has got diabetes and is pregnant, don't manage here.
Escalate, yes.
Escalate to the next level. If this fella comes here and a history of kidney failure, diabetes,
so empower the capacity.
We empower
lower
them.
Down,
Yes.
To the health worker right at the bottom.
To the pyramid, the bottom of the pyramid.
Yes,
so if the bottom of the pyramid in terms of healthcare systems is poor, does not have the capacity, these conditions will never manage them.
Okay.
Because there are many people. One doctor cannot deal with 1,000 people. And if you screen, for example, I'll give you, we as CHAC have screened about 3.5 million people in hypertension in the last 3 years. And diagnosed were over 200,000 people with hypertension. Where are the doctors to treat this large number of people?
And so that there's a lot of work to be done,
Yes.
definitely, and a lot of room for government and other institutions to keep building
And
the
build
healthy
systems
towards a healthy nation.
Yes.
So we don't get sicker or more sick. We become a healthy nation continually. And especially that access to healthcare universally, that should be something that really, the government and all parties involved should really invest in. Dr. This is November. This is the Diabetes Awareness Month, and I want you to just look at that camera there and just give a message to our viewers concerning maybe activities or a message that you would want to pass on to our viewers concerning this month, and anything else you would want to have to say as a parting shot for our viewers.
Thank you very much. We as a Christian Health Association of Kenya, of course, are working with the nation and other partners to ensure that we put in mechanisms right from the community to the health facilities to ensure that we build our capacity to, one, educate, screen, diagnose, refer, treat, and control diabetes and other chronic diseases. And one of our flagship programs within Christian Health Association of Kenya is non-communicable diseases. And to touch on diabetes specifically, we have been working with communities, lower health institutions for the last 7 years. Of course, empowered by quite a number of our partners, including Novo Nordisk, World Diabetic Foundation, Novartis, and all that, and the Kenya government and the Division of Non-Communicable Diseases is really supportive. And we have decided that going forward, in and around this month, culminating into the World Diabetes Day, we are going to have a challenge for us, which will include educating the communities, building systems, screening, linking people to treatment, using community-based systems. Over the last 2 weeks, we have been preparing our annual World Diabetes Day, which we have christened Chuck World Day Walk. It's going to be an annual effect, and we want to build partnerships going forward so that this particular week, about 3-4 days before then, we should engage on a long caravan. Caravan in that we would come to this church, we'll work together, to create education, screening, and then do a short walk or run, which will connect this facility properly to the one in Thika. And we can just do that short walk, and then guys come back. Then the next day we work with the ones in Thika. We do screening, we educate people. Those who are diabetic, we put them on treatment, and then we do a walk again to Kirinyaga. And this year we are doing that from Nairobi to Nakuru, and then we shall have a huge function at the PCA Nairobi West, where we are working with the county government of Nakuru. We are working with the partners I've mentioned, CHAC, and the communities, the whole day to screen and drive messages on diabetes.
I would think that should be PCA Nakuru West.
PCA Nakuru West.
Not Nairobi West.
No, Nakuru West.
Nakuru
Did I say Nairobi West?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Nakuru West.
A slip of the tongue.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah. So we really appreciate and all the best in your caravan, and even at CHAC as you continue to be part of the health system and doing the best to build a healthier nation.
Great, and thank you so much.
Good success follow you
Asante sana.
as you grow. Viewers, we've been talking about diabetes, and clearly, we do lots of mission. We do mission to places, we do mission to villages, to institutions, but the more we hear about lifestyle conditions, the more we are reminded that we must do a mission within ourselves, such that you as a body, you are a walking missionary zone. Do handle yourself well. You are the temple of the Holy Spirit. This has been Spotlight here on Hope TV, where you look and live. Thank you for watching.